Happy Friday, all. You are tuning into the Five Starr Wrestling Report Review Series channel, and we have a very special edition of the review series today. This is officially week 1 of the first AEW NXT head-to-head. And boy, what a night it was for both shows. We'll get to that in a little while, but first I must do the obligatory channel plugs. If you are tuning into the show for the first time and you would like to stay posted with FSWR content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We have videos uploaded on this channel every Monday and Friday. Monday's edition is the News and Weekend Events Report, and Friday is the Review Series edition, where we will analyze and recap MLW Fusion, NXT TV, and AEW Dynamite every week. Also, just so that I can get your feedback regarding everything, and so that you can also help properly grow this channel going forward, please make sure that you comment down below and give this video a rating, and I would appreciate anything you have to offer with this channel in the future. Alright, like I said, we got a lot of stuff to get into, and what do we want to start with? Man, my notes are all over the place right now. Boy, this is a great start to the show, isn't it? Just, let's turn the recording on and not even have all your crap together before you start the show. Way to go, Tommy. All right. You know what? Let's just get MLW out of the way. I don't have a whole lot to say about that show, so let's knock it out real quick and then move on to the bigger material. MLW Fusion, episode 77. Myron Reed and Cotto Brazil versus Airwolf and Gringo Loco. They aired a promo package beforehand where the Injustice dudes were complaining about stuff. Their gimmick is that they are whiny, petulant millennials that think the man is out to get them. Only, in this case, the man refers to the MLW officials, even though, as we have already clearly established after watching multiple Injustice matches, the referees call their matches directly down the middle without hesitation, so the gimmick, in fact, makes absolutely no sense. That being said, it is a gimmick that we really don't see a lot of in professional wrestling, probably because companies don't actually have the brass to try stuff like this, so points for effort, I guess. I just don't think the gimmick has any mileage. Anyway, they complained for a while in the video. The one dude, I think it was Jordan Oliver, said something about the cops killing Tupac. Anyway, they have the match. Myron's out there in a chest protector. They did a bunch of stuff for a while. I didn't really write down a whole lot of what happened here. We had a ridiculously absurd double electric chair in the corner where men nearly died. And in the finishing sequence to the match, which was either horrifically botched in every conceivable way imaginable, or it was the greatest screw job set up in the last decade, Gringo got a tag to Airwolf. Bodies were strewn around the ring. They immediately cut to a camera shot of the crowd for some reason. And when they cut back to the ring, Airwolf has somehow inexplicably hit a move on Brazil and pins him. I don't know how this move was executed. I don't know what Airwolf did to set up this finisher. All I could tell from the replay was that Airwolf did a move and pinned one of the heels. And then after the bell, the Injustice dudes beat up the ref again. And Gringo and Airwolf were such heroic baby faces in this match that they proceed to let the ref get killed as they walk up the ramp and high-five the fans. By the way, I should point this out for the record. The camera shot of the two women sitting next to each other on their phones and clearly not paying attention to this segment did not go unnoticed. We had a Mance Warner promo with his uncle Moonman. He said he brought his uncle down to watch Mance kill Havoc in the Bunkhouse Brawl later on. And, well, I guess it should be noted that we never saw Uncle Moonman make an appearance in the main event, so Segment ended up being all for nothing. It was a good promo, and I have no idea what the uncle was supposed to be sipping on here. I presume it was intended to be tequila or rum. Looked more like a mason jar of water to me, considering how carelessly the dude playing the uncle was drinking the crap. Anyway, Mance promised a bloodbath, and then he and Moon Man walked away. Moon Man was actually barefoot, which was strange. Not sure what it is with MLW's fascination with barefoot performers on this show. Kind of weird to think about. We had a Brian Pillman Jr. promo. He talked about what Austin Aries did to Teddy Hart last week. He actually claims that he did not even hear about what happened to Teddy until Bret Hart had called him on the phone to tell him what happened. So apparently Pillman does not watch the show either. Can't say I blame him. Anyway, he attempted to fake cry. It was hideous. He failed at showing any impression of charisma. Also hideous. It was at this point that I wrote down, I cannot believe this man is related to Brian Pillman. And the skit sucked. Selena De La Renta had a skit in the parking lot. The cameraman asks what kind of strategy she has suggested Jimmy Havoc use in the bunkhouse match later on. And, well, first she says, I'm not going to tell. And then 5 seconds later, she says, I'll tell everyone whenever I want. And it was at this point that I determined if MLW skits were given any more than 15 to 20 seconds of thought before they shot them, I'd be shocked. Like, here's the thing. Say what you want about overly scripted WWE promos. Like, yeah, they can be pretty cringeworthy a lot of the time. But at least I know what's going on in the vast majority of them. I have no idea what anyone says in like 90% of the MLW promos and skits. It's a bunch of incoherent psychobabble wrapped up into about 30 seconds of pre-tape, and then they just put it on TV. And by the way, spoiler alert, everyone, Selena's planned strategy for Jimmy later on apparently amounted to him having every single generic hardcore match you've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. A hardcore match, mind you, that involved things such as pumpkins and bales of hay. I'll get to that in a little while. We had a skit with the Von Erichs and the Dynasty outside of a children's hospital in Texas. And this is almost a direct quote here. The cameraman goes, "Hey, Kevin, what are you guys doing here at Texas Children's Hospital?" And yes, for the record, we are intended to believe that a random camera guy followed the Von Erichs to a children's hospital in Texas so that he could ask why they are hanging out at a children's hospital. Just roll with it. And their response is, what, you ask? It's, we are here to just visit the kids and make dreams come true. Yes, that was what the brilliant MLW crew came up with here for this skit. Not something like, we're donating some funds for a charity program, or we've got a fundraiser we're taking part in. Like, they don't even bother filming the Von Erichs actually interacting with kids at all. We're just apparently intended to presume that the Von Erichs randomly showed up at a hospital, hung around with kids for a little bit, and then left. Genius writing in this Major League Wrestling promotion. Anyway, MJF and Richard Holiday showed up, conveniently. They joked around about buying the hospital and turning it into a hotel or a casino. And Kevin Von Erich slapped coffee out of Holiday's hand, and Holiday had a mental breakdown. And maybe the segment would have come off better if Kevin Von Erich was not blatantly trying to maintain his composure at the sheer stupidity of the whole ordeal. But I think even Kevin Von Erich knew how garbage all of this was. Then, in the middle of a show filled with rage-inducing trash and repulsively written skits, Douglas James and Timothy Thatcher decided to go out to the ring and have an old-school technical match. I know I said last week that I was kind of sleeping on this match, primarily because I never seen a Douglas James match before and didn't really know what to expect going in, I ended up really enjoying this match here. James and Thatcher had a mean guy technical brawl. They went back and forth, worked each other over for a while. Eventually, James went up top for a big splash, but Thatcher got the knees up, locked in the FSWR armbar, and got James to tap out. And afterwards, Thatcher put James over, said he'd like to train with him, and then he challenged Tom Lawler to a fight. Good segment here. Thought they covered a lot of ground. Good match, good promos to put both guys over, and they set up a program that should be a lot of fun between Lawler and Thatcher. Easily the best thing on the show. It's actually amazing to me that in the midst of this particular show, where all this heinous crap is going on, they just have a random match where two guys go out there and perform. It's amazing. We had a Jimmy Havoc promo backstage. He was freaking out. He led the camera guy over to a whiteboard that read, "I am coming." He licked a rake, and then he told Mance Warner that he is screwed. Then we had the Bunkhouse Brawl main event between Jimmy Havoc and Mance Warner. And before we get into the match, it should be noted that Mance Warner was presumably so screwed in this Bunkhouse Brawl at the threat of being destroyed with a bale of hay. Yes, in a match where anything goes and everything is legal, Havoc's best course of action in guaranteeing that he would destroy Mance Warner apparently consisted of bringing in the following weapons to the ring: a cowbell, a shovel, a garden hoe, a pumpkin, and hay. And Warner justified this by having Casey draw these images on a whiteboard in the back before the match. So they hit each other with all the plunder for a while. They actually probably had the tamest hardcore match in most recent time. This was nowhere near as dangerous as that three-way from the AEW show where dudes were just falling through stuff and practically killing themselves. We did have Warner actually take a bump after getting hit with the bale of hay, and he sold it too. They did some stuff around the ring. Havoc's entire back looks like a damn pincushion. They did an absolutely preposterous spot toward the end where Havoc stapled Warner's tongue to a pumpkin top. No, not making that up. Warner gave Havoc a DDT into the pumpkin head. It was at this point that Rich and Tony completely gave up trying to call this match seriously. Havoc gave Warner a Death Valley driver through a plank. He then proceeds to staple Warner's tongue to another plank across two chairs while a pumpkin is placed on his head. Warner gave Havoc a superplex through the plank. Tony admits that this is the most entertaining thing he's seen in professional wrestling in a long time. Would not surprise me at all if he's telling the truth there. And after going back and forth and hitting each other with garbage for like 10 minutes, Warner eventually hits Havoc with a lariat and pins him. Yes, in a hardcore rules match, they had a guy win with a wrestling move. And then after the match, Havoc beat up Warner with a wrap of barbed wire and left him for dead in the ring. And yes, you heard that right. In what was essentially a 15-minute comedy match where dudes were hitting each other with pumpkins and haystacks, they did a post-match angle that involved a dude shredding another dude's skull with barbed wire after the match was already finished. And they even tried to play this up as serious. It failed. Anyway, there's your MLW recap for the week. If you like good old-school British technical wrestling, I would highly recommend you check out the Thatcher James match from this show. If you like when your professional wrestling show makes sense and is not filled with a bunch of goofy comedy and nonsensical crap, you may want to sit this one out. For me, I'm not a fan of this one, which sucks because I thought the last couple MLW shows were pretty good. This week they hit a pretty big wall. Okay, before I dive into the specifics of AEW and NXT, I think it'd be appropriate to give you some of my post-viewing opinions. Now, first off, this video is being recorded on Friday morning, so I do have the ratings and viewership breakdown in front of me here. All this was reported on the Forbes website yesterday afternoon. It was also reported on the major sites from Wrestling Observer and PW Insider. But just in case you're happening to check this out before reading anything into it, I'll give you my very brief analysis of the matter. Truth is, I'm not here to spend a whole lot of time talking about the ratings and viewership numbers because, first off, that content would be better suited to talk about in the Monday edition of the FSWR News Report. And second off, at the moment, I'm not really concerned about viewership and ratings breakdown. I'm still of the opinion that it's too early to judge how these ratings reflect both programs in the long term, and I think there are a lot of contributing factors as to why things played out the way that they did. With that being said, here are the results according to the Forbes website. In total average viewership, NXT averaged 891,000 viewers, and AEW averaged 1.409 million viewers. In the all-important 18-49 demo, AEW more than doubled NXT with 878,000 to 414,000. And in overall cable viewership, AEW finished number 2 in the market, while NXT finished number 10 in the market. Also, according to the Forbes website, AEW also had more social media publicity on Wednesday in Google and Twitter trends. So if you are out there to grade the success of these shows based on the numbered statistics, you can easily determine that AEW had won the battle on the first head-to-head with NXT. Now, whether this was due in large part to outside intrigue or curiosity from disgruntled WWE fans is yet to be determined, and whether this 1.4 rating is sustainable long-term is also yet to be determined. I'm more focused on judging the success of both of these shows based on what I saw. And from what I got out of both shows, here's my ultimate conclusion. I thought both shows were very enjoyable. They were very easy to watch, which I think is even more key to the shows just having good content. I did think the 15-minute overrun on the NXT show was a slight hindrance. I don't think it was needed, and it did cause the main event to feel like it was dragging. I thought both shows were paced well. Nothing really felt like it was rushed or pressed for time. I noticed that both shows were very heavy on the wrestling and less concentrated on the promo action. In terms of comparing both programs together, I think NXT had the better wrestling overall, and I use air quotes there. You can't see them, but I am using them in my notes, because I really think it all comes down to personal taste. With that being said, it's really hard to argue against the fact that the Matt Riddle-Adam Cole NXT title match was the best out of the conglomerate of matches we did see. It was the hottest match out of anything on either show. It was the most crowd-invested match out of anything on either show. A close second being the Nyla Rose-Rio women's title match, shockingly enough. And it was also the most action-packed match from start to finish. So NXT had the better wrestling, I believe. I think AEW did a better job with angles and story development. The post-match heat angles did feel very excessive by the end of the program, and I really hope that doesn't become a standard with their show, wherein after every match they have to follow it up with heat angles. I mean, you do those a few times every week, it's fine, but when you start doing it following every God-blessed skit you do, it becomes very repetitive, very superfluous, and it loses a lot of steam very quickly. So they need to be careful with that. Obviously, the AEW show felt like a bigger show, with it being at the Capital One Arena in front of 12,000 plus fans. It also felt like a more old-school WCW show. They didn't do a lot of backstage skits like you would see on WWF programming and what you currently see today on Raw and SmackDown. Everything took place in the arena for the most part. They had a big emphasis on matches. They had interviews at the top of the ramp, like Mean Gene used to do with the WCW wrestlers. And by the way, I guess that Tony Schiavone has now fulfilled the role of Mean Gene, where he'll be conducting interviews in the ring or at the top of the ramp on these shows, which is a good thing. They also had all of their key angles take place either at ringside or in the ring itself. Again, all of this you'd be accustomed to seeing on WCW programming back in the day. And it's also what you would normally see in current-day New Japan programming, and more focus on the angles and in-ring content, not so much backstage pre-tapes or skits. Speaking of Tony Schiavone, commentary booth for AEW was the best commentary booth I've seen out of any of their shows. I thought JR, Tony, and Excalibur worked great as a unit. They all brought their own unique, fresh takes. They sounded competent. They played off each other well. They didn't spend 15 to 20 minutes talking over each other and arguing about everything. They just called the action, gave their perspective on the stories, and tried to help establish character. And all of that is exactly what they needed to do. And I think for guys like JR and Tony, they're getting a lot more comfortable learning about some of the newer guys that they may have not been so familiar with in months prior. And especially for JR, you could always sense that this is a problem for him in the early stages of AEW shows. You could tell that he wasn't fully accustomed to a lot of the younger and fresher faces in the company. So it's good that he's doing his research and getting more acquainted there. So commentary for AEW was the best I've seen of their product so far. And in terms of my post-viewing experience, I'm still of the opinion that the Full Sail experiment is not working, and they really need to consider running smaller live venues in the future. This became abundantly clear after watching AEW run the Capital One Arena in DC. I also still believe that the decision to run NXT on USA 2 weeks prior to the AEW premiere on TNT might have been a little more of a detriment to WWE than they were initially anticipating. By numbers polls, it would seem that the interest factor in AEW picked up a lot more steam since fans already kind of figured out how WWE was going to run their show, and this became very evident after seeing the massive drop in viewership over the last 3 weeks. Now, whether this gradually picks up over time, we'll have to wait and see. But for right now, I think WWE might have cost themselves by trying to get that pre-head-to-head viewership against AEW. And with that all said, let's start talking about the shows. Let's do NXT first. NXT October 2nd, 2019. With limited commercial interruptions. Well, more like limited for the first 30 minutes of the program until they had to cram in the rest of the commercials later on in the show. Which basically meant that every match following the opener either had 1 or 2 stupid commercial breaks in it. Absolutely infuriating. Matt Riddle versus Adam Cole for the NXT Championship. Here is what my notes read about this match. This was the most exhilarating no-sell spot fest I can recall in recent memory. These two were not going out to the ring to wrestle. They were going out to the ring to hit every move in the book and kick out of everything possible. In other words, they had a takeover main event in the opener of a TV show. Everything was big move, kick out, big move, kick out, big move, kick out, repeat, repeat, repeat. There is a sequence at one point where Cole and Riddle are exchanging kicks back and forth, and Riddle gives Cole a German suplex right on the back of his neck. Thought he killed the guy. Like I said, they went 1,000,000 miles an hour. They had a great sequence where Riddle kept trying to lock in the Fujiwara armbar on Cole, but he couldn't keep the grip applied, so Cole kept squirming out. And finally, after this back-and-forth slugfest of two dudes playing games of one-upsmanship, Cole realizes that he is completely incapable of beating this guy clean, so he just clubs Riddle in the back of the head with his cast and pins him. And I was very sad. Not only because Matt Riddle did not win the NXT Championship, I was also sad because I saw some of the wildest back-and-forth action from a WWE match all year, and because Cole is a scumbag heel who wins at every cost possible, he had to resort to ruining it with a cheap tactic. So, Cole's a very bad guy. He's a villain, as we note in wrestling today. And as great as this match was, and as badly as everyone in the building, myself included, wanted to see Matt Riddle win the title, the show unfortunately peaked at this point. Because afterwards, Cole is celebrating in the ring, and who should come out but the returning Finn Balor. And the crowd's going insane for this. It is at this point that I wrote down Finn Balor is an absolute megastar on NXT the second he shows up. It's actually incredible to look at the stark contrast of Finn Balor on main roster WWE and Finn Balor on NXT. Anyway, he gets a mic, and he just says that Finn Balor is now officially NXT. We had a Velveteen Dream promo. He came out to the stage, apparently with a new couch. So I wonder how long it'll take before Roddy or someone else lights that couch on fire too. Maybe he was just discriminatory toward the first couch, so this one might be fine. I really don't know. Anyway, let me just read what I wrote down here. It's not a whole lot. Velveteen Dream said some words, something about taking on more men than once and being comfortable with it. I think he challenged Roderick Strong to a rematch. Not his best promo. They had a quick promo package for the Lio Rush-Drew Gulak Cruiserweight title match next week, which I'm not sure what they're doing with 205 Live now. I need to do more reporting on this because I only picked up a little bit about this early last week. I think they're still keeping the 205 Live show, but they're putting the Cruiserweight title on NXT and just making it a part of their brand now. The whole thing is really confusing. I need to do more research on it and update you guys on the Monday edition, but with what they're doing right now, it's just really confusing. But they are doing a Lio Rush Drew Gulak Cruiserweight title match next week, and that's all you need to know. Io Shirai versus Mia Yim. This was a good match, but it was also a very long match, and that became abundantly clear by the end. This is also the first of several matches on the show where they went to multiple commercial breaks during it. They tried to get the crowd into it, but it was borderline impossible for anything on the show to follow the Adam Cole Matt Riddle match, which, looking back at it in hindsight, I'm starting to wonder why they didn't just save that for the main event. And eventually Io went up top and hit a moonsault and won. And I was convinced at this point that Candice was winning the women's title later on and that they were setting up a title program with Io and Candice down the road. And, well, then they did what they did later on. Street Profits showed up to the building. Bianca Belair was there with Montez Ford. I actually had no clue that they were married until it was brought up in this very segment. And, well, we never saw her again. In fact, by the time the main event rolled around, they had mysteriously swapped out Bianca for Wale, and Bianca played absolutely no role in the main event, which was strange. It seemed like they were emphasizing something there, but I guess it was just to accentuate the fact that Bianca and Montez Ford are married. Johnny Gargano versus Shane Thorne. I won't say that they ever gave me a reason to care about this match in the build-up, primarily because I don't think they ever gave me a reason to care about Shane Thorne. Here is what I will say about this match. It was very good. It was not great. It was not blow away. Johnny's had much better matches this year. But in terms of what they did, I thought it was all executed well. They had a back and forth technical match, a little bit of Japanese influence in there. They did a couple near falls. Of course, nobody in the building thought that Shane was winning the match, so naturally there wasn't a lot of heat. And in the end, Johnny gives Shane a Poison Rana and a super kick and wins. And it's so weird. They do the match, Gargano wins with the super kick, and that's it. No angle afterward, no big return, no promo, no Tommaso Ciampa. Well, I'll get to that a little later on. But no, the whole thing was just Johnny wins and cut to the announce booth. Okay. Not that I'm complaining about it. It was just odd. You think they would be setting up something there, but I guess not. Candice LeRae versus Shayna Baszler for the NXT Women's Championship. Watching this match, it became very clear to me just how dumb it was for them to delay Candice's push for as long as they did. For as long as she was just Johnny Gargano's wife on this program, it really got to a point where I started to believe that they were never going to do anything with her. She is absolutely fantastic in the ring. Her and Shayna had a great title match here. It was awesome. This is the best work Shayna's done since her feud with Kairi Sane. Candice was a great babyface in peril. They did a spot on the outside where Shayna rammed Candice's arm into the steps and then kicked her arm in a minute later. She worked her over for a while. They went back into the ring and did some more stuff. There was an old champ, new champ chant, which I don't recall hearing in a long time from wrestling fans. Eventually, Shayna locked in the Karafuda clutch. Candice tried to roll out of it and grab the ropes, but she couldn't reach. And in the last gas effort, she realized that she had nowhere to go and tapped out. So another title retention for Shayna Baszler here. And like I said earlier, with Io going over Mia, I was solely convinced that the title change was happening here, but no, they didn't do that. And I don't really know what they plan on doing. I mean, I still want to know how Rhea Ripley fits into this whole equation, but it's another case of just waiting to see what they come up with. Great match, though. Candice is easily my favorite women's wrestler in this business right now. I don't even think it's close. Pete Dunne versus Danny Burch. The entirety of this match practically took place during the commercial, and I would like to think that it was a good match, but like I said, the whole thing was practically one damn commercial break, so I don't have a whole lot that I wrote down. And the little screen where they tried to show the action during the break was so damn small, I couldn't even make out half of what was going on. All I know is that they did some stuff for a while. Pete Dunne did every trick in the book, and then he won with the bitter end. And then afterwards, Damian Priest showed up and took out Dunne in the ring. So there's your next program. And hey, I've said this before. Damian Priest has been perfectly fine in his given role right now, but the dude needs something to work with. So far, all he's done is a bunch of 50-50 squash matches. He needed to enter a real program sooner rather than later, and at least this is something. Wouldn't have been my first choice, but it is what it is. I think a feud with someone like a Keith Lee would be better pairing, but I guess that means they'd have to wrap up the Lee Dijak program first, and I don't think that program is finished. But like I said, it's something in the short term for Damian to do. And I'll at least say this. At least they built up Pete Dunne properly so that it looks like a credible babyface going up against a credible heel. So they both have wins under their plate. So when one of them does take a fall, it'll mean something a little more. So that is good. We had a great Adam Cole interview with Kathy in the back. She claimed that Cole won underhandedly by using the cast, but Cole claims that he did not beat Riddle with the cast. He won with the last shot, which is a fact. He says that the cast is required by WWE management, and pretty soon the rest of the Undisputed Era show up and rant about Finn Balor. Cole tells him to forget about Balor and focus on the tag title match. And in our main event, Street Profits versus Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish for the NXT tag titles. As noted earlier, Wale came out to do the intros for the Street Profits. It was a really cool performance. Crowd's going crazy for this intro. Dawkins and Ford are very charismatic. Yeah, I hear Dave always talk about how awesome Montez Ford is and how if WWE booked him properly, he'd be a megastar for them. And the more and more I watch Ford compete, the more I start to think that Dave might be right about that. He's got that kind of star potential that you really just can't teach in someone. He's got that it factor to him. I said in the FSWR report that I was not so hot going into this match. I've seen a lot of Undisputed Era Street Profits matches this year, and while they haven't been bad, they've also been missing something that makes them great or standout performances. With that all being said, this was probably the best Street Profits Undisputed Era tag match out of the bunch that I have seen. They had a very standard tag match for a while with Fish and O'Reilly working over Ford. Dawkins got a hot tag and ran wild for a minute. He was not recklessly dropping dudes on their heads and necks like he was in their last match, so that was good. They ended up doing a lot of stuff toward the end, big dives and splashes. I think Ford did a big suicide dive over the post to everyone on the outside. Finally, after much chaos and mayhem, Roderick Strong runs down and grabs one of the Street Profits' ankles on the apron. Somehow this did not lead to a DQ, and then Fish and O'Reilly immediately hit the high-low on Dawkins to get the 3. It was a good match. It was nowhere near as good as the Riddle-Cole match. I honestly don't even think I'd put this over the Candice-Shayna match, but it was still very good. And after the bell, Cole tries to come out and congratulate Strong, Fish, and O'Reilly from the ring, but then the lights go down, and out comes the returning Tommaso Ciampa. And he paces around Cole. He never takes his eyes off the NXT Championship, and you can visibly see Adam Cole just standing there with his head down like, crap. And that was how they ended the show. I have no idea what Ciampa's current condition is. I mean, the dude just had neck surgery a little over 6 months ago. I cannot imagine that he is fully recovered yet, nor would I think that WWE Medical would clear him to compete anytime soon. So I don't really know what this means. You know, maybe they just shot it as a big angle to close out the program. I'm thinking he's not clear just yet, especially considering that they shot an angle with Cole and Balor literally in the opening segment of this very show. So if I had to venture a guess, I would imagine that Cole and Balor is the next program for the title, and then down the road, once Ciampa's cleared, they'll introduce that program heading into 2020. So, hey, they set up a lot of stuff for the future, which is good. All in all, I really like the show. I do not like the 15-minute overrun, and I can only be hopeful that this overrun does not eventually expand into something more. And I also did not like the excessive amount of commercials following the no commercial in the first 30 minutes deal. It felt like every match was consumed with breaks at the worst possible times. So, again, I'm hopeful that those are spaced out better over time because the commercials were ridiculous this week. And, following NXT, first time I'm ever saying this, so here we go. AEW Dynamite from October 2nd, 2019. Their first premiere edition on TNT. Cody versus Sammy Guevara in the opener. They had a nice little promo package for both guys before the match. Basically put over the story that Sammy thought Cody was overlooking him and that it would be his ultimate downfall in this match. The idea was that Cody has so much bigger things on his plate and that his focus wasn't strictly on his match here with Sammy. It was a really good story they were hyping up there. They had a pretty fun opening match, I thought. Crowd was strictly behind Cody here. They were doing this weird thing on commentary where Tony Schiavone would mention Nitro and being back on the air for the first time since 2001, but he'd never directly say WCW. But then as they're talking about the Jushin Liger-Brian Pillman match from the first Nitro in 1995, JR just blurts out the fact that Liger and Pillman also wrestled in WCW in 91 and 92. So it's like they were intentionally trying to not mention WCW, considering, the fact that WWE owns the rights. But then JR just says WCW outright, and it's like, well, okay, I guess it's cool for them to mention WCW. Maybe not. Who knows? Is there a lawsuit waiting to happen now? Anyway, Cody worked over Sammy for a while. They did an angle toward the end of the match where Cody went for the tope onto Sammy, but Sammy pulled Brandy in front of him and Cody took her out. They did some more stuff. Brandy grabbed Sammy's foot at one point, which led Cody to hit a disaster kick for a near fall. They did a reverse superplex spot. Sammy hit a Spanish fly onto Cody for a near fall. And then finally, Sammy tried for a moonsault, but Cody got the knees up and he cradled Sammy to get the 3. I liked the match. I thought Sammy made a good impression here. He got over with the crowd. And Afterwards, they did the big angle with Sammy going to shake Cody's hand, but they did the fake out, and Jericho ran in to attack Cody, which actually ran through a commercial break. They came back, and Jericho gave Cody a powerbomb through a couple chairs and did a promo at the top of the ramp. Good start to the show. Brandon Cutler versus MJF. We had a fun heel promo from MJF before the match. It was not his best ridicule of the hometown crowd, but still pretty good. They had an okay match. It was very short. I know I mentioned earlier that the pacing of the show was really good on both parts, but I think you could tell they were really trying to fit in as much as they could here, like they were pressed for time. And at the end, Cutler went up top, lost his balance, came crashing down on his ankle. MJF took advantage. They did the deal in the corner where MJF took the ref, and he ended up kicking out Cutler's knee. And then he just locked in the armbar, and Cutler tapped. The finish was weird to me. And not in the sense that they probably called an audible after the botched spot, but Cutler ends up tweaking his ankle at the end. And whether this was planned or not, I really don't know. But the weird part is that MJF got Cutler to tap, but he didn't get him to tap with like a knee bar or something. Like the injury angle didn't even play into the finish, because MJF won with an arm bar. I mean, yeah, he kicked out Cutler's leg before putting in the hold, but I don't know. It was a really bizarre finish to me. We had a skit with Chris Van Vliet, Kevin Smith, and Jason Mewes ringside. First thing I noted was that Kevin Smith has lost a ton of weight since I last saw him. I remember when I saw him and Mewes doing Degrassi series episodes back in the day. God, must have been, 2004, 2005? A long time ago. But he looks great now. Anyway, Jack Evans and Angelico showed up to belittle them. There were a lot of inside jokes and geek talk references, none of which I understood. Private Party walks in, and nothing really happens after that. They just sort of leave. Another really weird segment. Then we had the greatest skit I've ever seen in my life. SCU were outside the White House in D.C., and Scorpio Sky did what I can only best describe as the most accurate Barack Obama impression ever. And then we cut to the stage where Shivani's out to interview SCU, and Scorpio puts over Daniels and Kaz as one of the best tag teams ever, says he's going to sit the tournament out and watch them compete, and then Phoenix and Pentagon come out and get in their faces, and those guys end up getting into it at the top of the ramp before guys ran out to separate them. So it would appear that they are teasing the idea that this tournament boils down to SCU versus Phoenix and Pentagon, which would make my bracket predictions incorrect, but I guess we'll see what they do. Hangman Adam Page versus Pac. Yes, not Pac, Pac. I'll get it right. This wasn't a bad match or anything, but I did not enjoy it as much as I thought I would. I think one of the problems was that because Pac was the heel here, he tried to actually work a more old school like heel style, was slowing the pace down and being a lot more gritty and grounded in his offense. The problem is that I don't think Hangman Page works well as the valiant underdog babyface. He's not that kind of worker, at least from what I've seen of him. Like, the fans were clearly behind Page as the face, and they booed Pac throughout the match. But Page didn't do a lot of long-term selling. He essentially just worked a normal Hangman Page match. He did a lot of signature moves. He didn't sell for as much as he probably should have. And with Pac working the pace that he did in this match, I think it would have been better if Page sold for a lot longer than he did in order to build up to a big comeback finish. Instead, it was like, let's just get our stuff in. Page makes a small comeback at the end, and then they do a finish. I did think the finish was well done, though. Pac hit a black arrow to the back of Page and immediately locked in the brutalizer submission, and Page immediately tapped out. There's literally no hesitation. So they're doing a great job protecting that move. And this is something that New Japan does very well in their booking that I think AEW is going to emanate in their booking. Protecting guys' finishing moves and only doing false finishes and kickouts from finishing moves when absolutely necessary. So the match wasn't great, but it did what it was supposed to. Nyla Rose versus Riho for the inaugural AEW Women's Championship. The one thing I did not take note of when they introduced this belt is just how tiny it is. You know, the ref is holding this belt up during the intros, and I'm watching him. It's like, this dude can wrap both of his hands around the side of this thing with ease. Which, at this point, I pretty much put it together that there's no way Nyla is winning this belt. Merely because there's no way it would even fit around her waist. Like, they designed this belt strictly for Riho to carry. And I know I had a lot to say regarding this match during the build-up. If you've checked out my other content on the FSWR channel, particularly my talking points with AEW, you would know that I was not a big fan of them booking this match to begin with. I said that given the position they're in, their best case scenario would be to have Riho win the belt and give the fans that big crowd-pleasing moment at the end. And after watching it, I can confidently say this. This was the single most crowd-invested match of this entire show. Although I may not have had any real emotional attachment to either Nyla Rose or Riho winning the title here, I cannot deny that these people were solely behind Riho here. They got into the false finishes. They were cheering Riho on throughout all the heat portions. They really wanted Riho to walk out as the inaugural AEW Women's Champion. Like, when they started doing the big spots and false finishes toward the end, they cut to like 3 or 4 camera shots of the crowd. You could visibly see people reacting to what was going on. Like, if Nyla kicked out of a 2.5 count, the fans were collectively angry. They hit a big move. Everyone was into it. And I will say this. When you can capture all of those crowd emotions in one match, you did something right. So, I don't know what the hell they did right here, but somehow, some way, Nyla Rose and Riho ended up having a much better match than I thought they would. Now, with that being said, I'm still glad they went with the finish that they did. It looks like they're setting up a program with Riho and Britt Baker down the road. I'm fine with this. There was some rather goofy stuff that happened in this segment. I mean, I think that's the best way I could sum it up. It was just goofy, odd things. Like, I didn't like the stuff with Nyla Rose threatening to use chairs to get herself DQ'd. Thought it was incredibly stupid. And I did not like the post-match angle with Nyla jumping Riho. Not just because I thought it was another pointless heat angle that they really didn't need, but it was the fact, and I have not heard anybody else bring this up, which is actually shocking to me. For the entirety of this match, Britt Baker is on commentary, watching the match. And after Riho wins the belt, Nyla jumps Riho and starts beating her up. Well, first, Nyla nearly cripples that Nakazaka Waka, or where the goofball's name is, with a botched powerbomb. But then she jumps Riho, and Britt Baker just completely vanishes. She makes no effort to come out and help Riho. What a horrible babyface, I wrote down here. No, instead, it's Kenny Omega that comes out to make the save. Yeah, think about that for a minute. Kenny Omega's first appearance on AEW television is doing a short 20-second run-in to break up a fight involving the women's division. What a megastar. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega versus Santana Ortiz and Chris Jericho. So, here's the best way I could sum this match up without making it seem like I'm completely hating on it. This was a perfectly fine 6-man main event match with one of the dumbest angles I've ever seen in my life. And it's not the post-match angle that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the angle they did like 3 minutes in with Jon Moxley running in and attacking Kenny Omega. And not only does Moxley jump Omega right in front of the referee, which does not lead to a DQ, by the way. That part was dumb in and of itself. But it's the fact that they did an angle where Moxley attacked Omega. They brawled all the way up to the VIP section of the arena. They do a spot where Moxley gives Omega the elevated dirty deeds through the glass table. And then they just cut back to the ring after a commercial where the heels are getting the heat on Matt. I was like, was this not the most WCW thing we saw on either show? I cannot believe what I saw in this main event. They actually did a mid-match brawl sequence plus an angle where a dude was driven through a glass table, and it was merely transitional material so that they could come back from commercial and continue the match. It should be noted too, the best part with Moxley attacking Omega right in front of the ref was the fact that after the ref sees this blatant run-in, he just stands there like, oh, damn, wasn't expecting that. And then he's just like, okay, they're crowd brawling. Guess the match continues because wins and losses matter in AEW. There will be a winning team in this six-man, despite 1/6 of the competitors being dead after having his face smashed through the glass. So, yeah, that part sucked. Anyway, they come back from the break. LAX and Jericho work over Matt for a while. Matt eventually got a hot tag to Nick. Nick sprung around like a pinball for several minutes, sending all these big dives. They try to set up Santana for the Meltzer driver, but Jericho cuts off Nick with a code breaker, which looked awesome. LAX did a double senton splash to Matt in the corner, and then Jericho hit his Judas effect on Matt to get the 3. And afterwards, they did the big heat angle with Jericho and LAX beating down the faces. Cody and Dustin showed up. They got beat down. Guevara was back in there. And then, who should show up but Jack Swagger, who now just goes by Jake Hager. And he had every generic deer in the headlights expression you could possibly imagine. He did a couple things, nearly killed Dustin with a gut-wrench powerbomb through the ring bell table, which Jericho actually had to help him with. And people chanted, "We the People," which is like the only thing Swagger ever got over with in WWE in his entire tenure with the company. And, yeah, that was the big angle they did to go off the air. I presume this is either some kind of faction or alliance that they put together at the end of the night. Because, well, you know, what professional wrestling really needs in 2019 is more faction warfare. But whether it's a faction or just a small alliance of guys, I'll say this, I like the group. You got a nice balance of talent in there. Everyone has a distinct role. You got the established tag team. You got the young up-and-coming high flyer. You got the big muscle. And you got the heel champion. So it's at least a good stable. Like I said, I don't know how badly we need more stables in pro wrestling. But, you know, if they're using it to set up good programs down the road, I don't see how that's a bad thing. I don't really know where Swagger fits into the whole equation. I mean, the only guy he's really open to feuding with right now, based on the people they involved here, was Dustin Rhodes. And God, wouldn't that be a catastrophe in the making? I mean, no offense to Dustin. He's a great talent and all, but he needs good dance partners to work with at his age. And sorry to say, but I don't think Swagger's that guy. Anyway, I know it seems like I'm pointlessly ranting by now. Don't get me wrong. I did like the show overall. I thought everything flowed well. The crowd was hot from top to bottom. We had a nice contrast in ring styles. The angles and promos were good. The heat angles, they did seem a little excessive by the end. Yeah, but at least they were used to build up programs. And while the show did seem a bit heavy on the wrestling side, it was not completely devoid of angles and stories. So as a debut show, I thought AEW did well. Again, just to sum everything up in short order, I thought both shows were very strong. There was a lot of emphasis on the wrestling aspect of things. AEW focusing a little more on in-ring angles to further storyline development. Riddle Cole was the best match of the bunch that I saw. There was nothing gravely insulting to my viewing experience. There was the stupid thing with the dudes blatantly interfering in front of the referees, which did not lead to DQs. Coincidentally, this happened on both shows, and both were equally as dumb. And I thought both shows had a nice distribution of variety and content. I do think AEW's match flow was a lot smoother than NXT. Yeah, they were kind of going for like a breakneck pace this week, while AEW focused a little more on methodical in-ring style. And I also think AEW emphasized the ring style variety better than NXT. Yeah, I know NXT was kind of introducing their variety of ring style with the technical stuff, and they were trying to give you the variety with the cruiserweights, and this week it kind of felt like it all blended together, whereas I could definitely see the style variety with the AEW matches more. But as noted earlier, nothing was going to top that Riddle-Cole match, including anything on the AEW show, so take it for what it's worth. I enjoyed myself. I'm looking forward to seeing what both shows have to offer in the future, and while I don't think we will ever reach the peak in interest of professional wrestling from the late 90s and early 2000s, this is the most interesting and newsworthy professional wrestling has been in the media for a long time. So, we'll see how it goes. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you have not done so already, make sure you subscribe. Click that bell icon to keep updated on all future FSWR content. Go ahead and give this video a like, and make sure you share some of your feedback down below. I'm interested to hear from you guys. What did you like? What did you not like? What show did you watch live? What show did you prefer? Anything you have to offer, let me know down below. And with that all said, I will see you all on Monday for the next installment of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report, where we will be covering some more follow-up on the NXT AEW Wednesday shows, and we will also run down the first SmackDown show on Fox.